And you're right, because if all that Professor Shirley has told us is going to happen, it has to happen in a sustainable way. Because if that doesn't happen, then we're going to lose it all eventually. Can you imagine having the tourists coming to Ocho Rios? We bus them in 40 minutes into Kingston or Spanish Town, and then we have not been able to maintain the environment and the cadence and the ambience of Kingston City and Spanish Town. All the development that we have done so far in this country and that we hope to do in the future must be sustainable. And it must develop both rural and urban areas. And therefore, we thank you for that message on this occasion. Ms. Kelly Tomlin has worked for more than 20 years in the energy industry. She has an MBA from the New York University, a doctorate in law, and a journalism degree with a major in business public relations from West Virginia University. She was appointed President and Chief Executive Officer of Jamaica Public Service Company in April 2012. She has brought to GPS extensive industry knowledge, along with strong business strategy and operations experience. But there's a line in her bio that stands out at me. It says that her trademark is organizational rebuilding and rebranding and repositioning of entities. Here to tell us about the repositioning and or positioning of the Jamaica Public Service in this new paradigm of the logistics hub is Ms. Kelly Tomlin.
Well, Chairman Gordon, Professor Gordon, Ms. Tiffany Gordon, I'm feeling bad that I'm not a Gordon. I can be Kelly Gordon today. But Patrick Stewart, President Stewart, I'm glad you're a non-Gordon with me on the podium. Master builders, my JPS family, friends, good morning. My topic is one that I know is really important and I take very seriously. It's this idea of how do we, in the midst of all this, really identify a sustainable energy option. And I like to start always with the national goal because I think it's important to bring context to it. And Vision 2030 is quite specific to create a modern, efficient, diversified, and environmentally sustainable sector for all Jamaicans. And you'll hear this, I hope, throughout the JPS speak, because I know there was a time perhaps where, some of our customers, we just love them more than other customers. And what we've tried to say with our new vision of leading an energy revolution to support the growth and prosperity of Jamaica, and that our mission of finding a solution for every Jamaican meant every Jamaican. Everyone's no child left behind, no Jamaican left behind. So we're really serious about that. And we know we have to look at, go back, the three pillars of any energy market. The concept of security, sustainability, and affordability. And lucky for us in Jamaica, our security, meaning what resource do you have on your soil that you can use, water, wind, solar, what we know about now, also fulfills the sustainability, meaning that it continues to support our environment. And make no mistake, listening to Professor Gordon Shirley, we know that, Shirley Gordon, is that we have a resource that is second to none and that depends on our continuing support of its beauty. And we know that the environment does matter. And I'm hearing a growing concern in Jamaica about how we do all these things together, and I do believe we can. And fortunately for us, that it continues to look as though, as we look at the price, that we also may be able to fulfill the affordability criteria as well. So where do we, it goes very fast. Okay, where are we now? We have 7 national goals. I want to spend a moment on those because I think sometimes we just skip over the fact that we do have a 7-point energy plan, both at the GOJ and at JPS. The first one, the one I'm so passionate about that I don't think it gets enough press, is energy conservation and efficiency. We know today that we're leaving a lot, and I'm imploring on our master builders today to help us with this. We know that we don't have the infrastructure that supports sustainability and energy efficiency and conservation. And at JPS, we haven't done, I believe, a good enough job at looking at the demand side and how we bring more time of use and how we really operate with our builders to say, how do we build together? How do we operate that takes people off the peak? How do we do this together? And you'll hear more about that from us. We have gone on to a very aggressive program now to go into every parish and really teach and train on energy efficiency and conservation. It is an art and a science. But what I've noted is that it sounds so sacrificial when we say it, oh, we're going to do energy efficiency and conservation, but it should be in a place of power, that we're not going to waste one dime. And this concept of waste you'll hear permeated throughout, I know, my speech, and I hope through my colleagues, this idea that getting passionate about not wasting $1, not 1 kilowatt hour, not 1 barrel of oil, and to do it in the support of a nation. I will say, when I went around JPS, and I do go around the country, talking to people about what's your grandest desire for energy and what's your grandest desire for Jamaica, it always comes back to such a sense of nationalism and growth and prosperity, and this idea that we're poised and we're at a pinnacle to move forward, and to do it, all of us reduce, reuse, recycle, and seeing that as a place of power. This modernized energy infrastructure, I will say that I know we make deals, and we did in privatization, and one of those deals was that JPS would not replace its power generation as it got older. And I think right now it's really ripe for us to stand back and say, okay, we made some decisions perhaps 15 years ago. Do they really make sense now, given the energy market of today? And I'm happy to say that that sense has been amended, and rightfully so. You can imagine me coming here after 25 years. I say 20 because it makes me sound really old if I've been doing it 25 years. But, we have a very old infrastructure, and I get my asset list. I say, oh, I guess we're retiring this, replacing this. They're like, no, we can't replace their generation. I said, but we can pour millions of dollars into fixing it. Yes, but we can't replace it. And that really was stymieing us and really adding to our fuel bill. The third one, the one I think we're just scratching the surface on, is renewable energy. And to do it, we have to be smart, because I can't talk about one of these topics without talking about them all. And I hope we're starting to see that none of these levers work in singularity. They all work together, and we have to understand how that happens, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Fuel security through diversification. We do talk about renewables, but we do have to diversify our resources. We now have really one main one and a sprinkling of others, and we do have to bring gas or some other fuel diversity, and I'll speak more about that before we can really optimize what we have, our renewables. And fifth, sixth, and seventh, I won't spend a lot of time on because I could get real emotional about it, and I don't want to. Number 5, this comprehensive governance and regulatory framework. Today, we have national agendas that are not furthered by our current framework, and I'll give you 100 examples, but one of which I just mentioned, was the idea that we know today, right now today, the thing you and I can do together, especially as builders, is reduce usage. So as you look on your bill, on the left-hand side, it shows you what you have used. Well, what the utility is paid for today is getting you to spend more kilowatt hours. And that doesn't make sense for me or for you. And my own team says to me, why are you making us support energy efficiency and conservation? Because if you've been in the utility business, you know one thing. Utilities uniquely rise and fall on the economic prosperity of the people who use your product or service. And you could say there's a link to all businesses, but there's a direct one-on-one link to the utility. So we have to step out in faith, and you know what that is, taking the first stair, not being able to see the whole ladder, and say, I know intuitively in my heart, if we do this, people will be able to afford their bills, business will grow, and so on and so forth, but we don't have the regulatory framework that honors that. And 6 and 7, this idea that the government has stepped out, and I'm so proud to be a partner with them in saying that our own energy usage is off track, our buildings are off track, and really looking at first-class technologies to reduce usage. I have an interest in that because I do want my largest customer to be able to pay their bill. And 7, to promote eco-industries. I want all my customers to be able to pay their bill on time because the dollar devalues very quickly. Promote eco-industries. Again, I think we know this, but so many opportunities in this industry, and how do we create an eco industry that really is vibrant, and you'll see we're starting to do that. I talked a little bit, and I put 4 or 5 priorities together that I really do think are our priorities, and I think we're pursuing them. I mentioned one, this idea of fuel diversity, and I just presented a timeline of what's happened. I think we all know the EWI story, I won't go into it, but we did have a situation where we had for years had an RFP, we did get a contract that fell apart, and since then the ESET. And I do have to give a plug for the ESET, and I hope we continue to have a body that is perhaps not the utility and not the regulator, but something that bridges that gap, that has business acumen embedded into that can come and break some ties. Because from my perspective, and I'm sure the OUR would argue differently, I always feel that I have no recourse. Here is an organization with unfettered power. They have no real appeal process that they can or cannot, in my opinion, go for or against the national stated goals, energy efficiency, and so forth. And there's not really, in my mind, a bridge between those two. And what I have seen through ESET is a real thoughtful approach from a group of people that come from all walks of life, from the education to business to government, and it's really added a lot of richness to our discussion and helped mediate some of the OUR JPS issues. It is funny because when Dr. Vin Lawrence calls us, we do come, and he tries to seat us strategically, so we're not in a battleground, but sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. But I wanted you to know where we are so far and what they've recommended. It's been publicized, but I think it's important. JPS is offering to build a 190 megawatts. I'll talk a bit why that size and what type that is and why in a minute. Number 2 and 3, we really do believe we have to leave some space for economic development. We know our industry has to be refueled, and you can see some of those preliminary numbers there. And we have made an agreement, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it, a promise, a commitment to convert Bogue. And as I understand it, we had made that promise in 2004. And as I think a lot of you know, that we did enter into a contract last year, and I in particular to convert it last year. What happened in that, we had the gas proposal from EWI, and it did not make sense at the time, perhaps, to bring in 2 very different technologies. And so we have been a little bit treading water, but we have committed to do that. And just to give you some numbers, it would save the country $60 to $70 million a year in fuel costs if we do that. And we've committed to do that, and I think we'll be held to our feet to the fire, so to speak. Priority number 2, and I said this, but I want us to understand that it does take a plan to integrate renewables. Today, we're going to have, and you'll see the pictures, contracted for 78 to 80 more renewables, bringing it to 148 or 150 megawatts, and that's good. But you can recognize on a cool day and a non-peak moment, we could have only 400 megawatts or so of load. So if I have 150 megawatts of renewables available, and they're not always available, but let's just say they are, and I have PPAs that I've already entered into with IPPs, you can see how this math starts to fall apart. I have renewables, and you may have heard the story from Germany. My husband just came back there from speaking. The renewables got so large they couldn't be accommodated by the base load, and they started curtailing renewables, which is something you never want to do. And so I have a mantra in our office: we will not be Germany. We will not be Germany. And so how do we do that? We're smart. We work together. And I will tell you, I'm so proud of Fitzroy Vidal and his team, and he has started using this phrase. And what I've always said, it's not just the technology that kills us, it's our relationships and how we really interact with each other and really coordinate our action together. He's starting using the phrase, the Jamaica energy family, the energy family. And I was so happy I was in the family. But clearly, there's a lot of us in the energy family. And I think when we start to think about that, then we will really be able to bring the renewables on in a way that makes sense. So you'll hear me, and you can see some of it there. We have to do a real resource plan. You'll hear me say this integrated resource plan. We did go out for an RFP for renewables without that. And an integrated resource plan really shows you what resources are available to you, what location is optimal. So you set out a grid, because you don't start from scratch, guys. We can't start from scratch. We already have generating systems on. We have a T&D system, a transmission distribution system already made. And whatever we add to it has to fit in the best way. So we have this plan that really will show us what resources, what place. And then we have to have some incentives, whether they're tax incentives or appropriate incentives, to incent the right resource at the right place. And research and development, the world is changing so quickly, and we don't want to be left behind. I mentioned partnership and energy family, and this will be a whole nother session, but we're studying at JPS. Why are the smartest people, I do tell my team this, we're so smart, but we have an execution issue. We've been studying execution. We have a book called Execution, the Discipline and Art of Getting Things Done. Like, you know, get her done is my country coal miner daddy used to tell me all the time, Kelly Ann, just get her done. And the idea is we just got to get her done. And what is getting in our way? I would suggest it's not the technology, it's our relationships and our ability to have more we and less of me. And when I started talking about aligning partners, I think that's why I always start my presentations with the national agenda and how we all fit into it. And so we start broadly and get down to the details, but if we're all not committed to that, and we're not aligned, nothing gets done. And I will say again, I think that's why ESET is being, I think, very, very effective, because they are in the place of making us align around what we're trying to do. And I mentioned this, but I want to say it over and over, a holistic plan. Because all things in and of themselves sound good, right? Wheeling, everybody can wheel, everybody can have their own resource, and to an extent, all of that can be true. And you know, this whole, I call it myth of having it all. You can have it all. You can be a CEO, be the best mother, weigh 2 pounds, have no wrinkles. Whatever your having it all is, I suggest that you may be able to have it all, but not at the same time. And my favorite book out today is The One Thing. You know, you can't have 14 priorities that are number one. You have to have a priority that's number one. And for me, if I were choosing, and I'm not the chooser, the decider, as George Bush used to like to say, I am a part of the puzzle, but I would say it's lowering energy bills for everybody. So how do we do that? And I think that we may have to choose. Now let's clap ourselves really and truly. And I'm having strategic meetings in my company throughout Jamaica, and I'm saying, how do we reduce energy bills by 30% by the end of 2017? Let's get crazy. Maybe we say we don't give everybody a bill. If I don't give you a bill, can you take $50? If I don't read your meter, can you take $100? This idea we're wasting money when I read a meter, that it costs me more to read the meter than I make on that meter. Now you see how crazy that is, right? I can tell you more, but I'm trying to keep us up to date. But the idea is, let's get all crazy about lowering energy bills and lowering energy costs for everybody. And it might mean that perhaps one or two of us don't get exactly what fits into our plan, and that includes JPS, that we don't get exactly what we want. I wanted to step back and talk about a company that I love dear, and I have to say this. I am doing these strategic meetings, and I have on my wall a paper that I had when I got here. My first day here as a worker was March 30th, 2012, and I remember sitting on the plane on the Caribbean Airlines, and I had the Gleaner, and there was a whole page ad called Fight for Your Light. And I was like, wow, this isn't good. Our customers don't like us. This is really, really bad. And I just heard all from everybody how just wicked everybody worked at JPS. I said, all 1,600 of them wicked? And you know, the math doesn't seem to work out for me. But as I got to know those 1,600 people, I will tell you, you line them up. I haven't found in my history more committed, brilliant people. So I started saying, we have some bad PR. I have to work on the PR, but it's not PR. PR doesn't save you, because we all know you can't put lipstick on a pig and call it a dog. And so I have to start saying, I am now, you know, the fact provider. So JPS this year spent about $34 million to add to our renewable portfolio and bring hydro. We had, as I think you might guess, a bad hydro year because of the drought, but it is really important that we maximize our hydro, and there we are. And the second one is entering into the renewable space. We are going to partner with one of these, we hope so, with one of the renewable developers, but really to get it across the finish line. And we're not staffed to have 3 complicated PPAs done, and it was a lot of, let's just say, battles between I and my own team at times, but really to get those PPAs across in a way that protected the consumer but really made it go forward was important. And I was happy to watch my team say, we got to protect the customer, we got to protect the customer. And it is something that perhaps is some culture change, but I was proud to see it really working. So I wanted to make sure we all understand when I say the effective integration of renewables, because if we don't build the right generation, and I would suggest that we were planning to build the wrong generation, that supports the integration of renewables, we'll just spend more money than we need to, and we won't get the benefit of the resource. So what does that mean? That means that instead of building a great big power plant, I have to build a smaller one. But what it really means is I might have to pay a little bit more for that power plant. It won't be this cheapest power plant, but what it will be able to do is ramp up and down, provide voltage support, what we call ancillary services, and it'll be able to take those, what will now be 150 megawatts of renewables, and be able to play with it. If you think about a light dimmer, you know, the renewables are intermittent, but they don't go off all at once, and they usually don't, and they don't give you a warning, although wind's getting to be very predictable. Usually cloud comes over, and our machines have to do one of two things. They have to be able to respond real quickly, or we have to keep what we call spinning reserve running, which is very expensive. So what we're proposing to do is offer a plant that can provide the ancillary services. And why do I think that's appropriate? Because if we add the renewables, and we must, because today gas is cheap, tomorrow, you know, oil may be cheap, who knows? But as long as we have maximized our internal resource and have the facilities that can let us do that, we stand in the best position. And I want to say this, and I don't know if many of you are involved. I couldn't believe this number when we started doing our research. 55 companies are registered in Jamaica today to be ESCOs, anything from energy efficiency, renewables, a lot of solar companies. And why is that interesting? It's interesting for a number of things, but one of which the landscape is changing. And the more providers there are, the more options there are, and we start to, I think, really open up this market. And you can see what's happening to make that happen. More insurance options, more financing options, thank you very much. Grants are available. We're seeing the emergence of new technologies that let it happen. And there is this mental thing, it's not on there, this idea that there is room for us to move in the energy efficiency. We can be more creative when we use our power, so we're not using the most expensive peak load. And remember, between 6 and 9:30 at night, I'm turning on the most inefficient power plant, yes? And we all are paying, even though if you don't have time of use, the energy bill is going up when we're turning on our less efficient plant. So I'm excited to see that we have 55 and seeing some of the players evolve. And you can see those here. See JPS, still little, but we're gonna get big guys. This really represents the players who are in the market, the big players, and a lot of players are in there, but who by installed capacity and by marketing share, you can see a lot of new leaf in there. But new names we haven't heard before, are playing an important role in our energy mix. There's many recent and emerging trends we have to pay attention to. I started engineering school, really did, because, you know, back in the day, if you were good at math, you were going to engineering school, and because I never knew a person that ever gone to college, that sounded as good as anything else. And so I went to engineering school for about 1.5 years, and you can see it, that's not what I majored in. So, in any event, transformation of the electric sector, a lot of things I've talked about already. The supply channels are changing, the influence of technologies, but the customer is changing. And the mentality is changing. And you know that, right? You have to change the mind before you change the thing. And so I know we've been working a lot on changing the things, and I think now it's really come time for us to change the mind. So you can see how those all work together, and I'm excited to see that, or not, I don't know if I'm excited to see that Jamaica stands in the same place that we stand in a lot of countries where we have this good and bad story of load is declining. And now, I wasn't here back in the day, but as I understand, we used to have a growing infrastructure, and today, like most developed nations, we are seeing a decrease in decline. And these new players are emerging that are really making the difference. Solar City. And why is that important? And you might see, and you are going to hear JPS talk with our regulator, because what Solar City does is lease. And why am I passionate about leasing? And I use this story a lot. And I use it in the education space because it's so obvious. Education space usually is daytime loads, really benefits from solar. And what happens today, and this is controversial, is that all the wealthy schools go off the grid because they can afford the capital investment. And the school that I just gave their first ever electricity to is paying for the grid. Now that can't be right? That cannot be right. And so I always suggest we have to have a higher customer charge that has, and maybe lower kilowatt hour charges, but this idea of making it accessible to everybody. And Solar City is doing that throughout the US, and not just in places, if you will see there, that's driving me crazy too. just where it is sunny and lots of other places. What are some other things that are really happening that are really going to change this space? That solar technology is expected to double in output, and it is getting cheaper every day, so that makes it more accessible. But we still have to get creative on how we deliver it and how do we really find a solution for every Jamaican. And finally, the numbers here you see. You saw 52 cents kilowatt hour, and this thing is jumping around, so I'm not going to say it, for battery solar. And what I would suggest that is much cheaper, and as I said, my husband is a solar developer, so he argued with me not to put that up there, but that's my most recent numbers. But what we do know, it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper with batteries, and we've reached grid parity without batteries, and we're marching toward grid parity, meaning the same price with battery. So it's going to change everything. And JPS wants our master builders to know that we stand ready to partner with you to make the life-changing, sustainable changes that we believe we need for economic development, for prosperity, and for Jamaica. And you have a lot of other options, and we love them too, but I'm up here, so I'll talk about ours. We have, we do sell the hybrid renewables. We do have a pure solar play, and what we believe that we are standing in a place to work with you to help you bring on infrastructure that fulfills the national policy and really fulfills what we're aiming for today, not $1 lost, and really optimizing our energy use going forward. So my booth's outside, but we really want to set the framework of a JPS that yes, we believe, and I do believe, that we need fuel diversity, strong base load, cheap base load, because all the industries that Prof. Shirley mentioned are going to bring families, are going to bring schools, are going to bring a number of things, and we really will have to have that foundation of a strong base load. But we also are going to have to be real creative in using what we have here in Jamaica. And JPS stands ready to be your partner in whatever decision. So finally, I'd like to leave you with the thought that it's a really exciting time. Exciting on a number of different ways, that I think the mentality, we're getting that right, and we're understanding that, you know, like it or not, nobody is an island. We have to get ourselves together to work on this. And that the technologies are coming, and people are really demonstrating some faith. I mentioned this idea again of taking the first step before you can see the whole stair, and the concept of understanding whether you're JPS or whomever, you're not going to get it just the way you like it, but understanding that that's going to be okay. And I'll leave you with the final quote. You know, we're always fond of talking about, you know, problems, and we do have them. But right around that corner, because there's a problem, there is a solution. And it's the magic that exists between them that not only are we called upon to do right now, it's almost our moral obligation. And certainly I know, because I talk to so many of our customers, that the prosperity of Jamaica depends on it, and Jamaica deserves nothing less. So thank you very much. We look forward to talking to you at our booth.
The face of the JPS means business, and I particularly like, I made a note here, particularly like the fact of the national agenda, starting with the national agenda. Great. Just want to remind everybody that the Master Builders has its own agenda, and that is very, very simple. To use Professor Shirley's ideas and strategies of developing the logistics hub along with the ports, all the ports, and marry that with the sustainability that Ms. Gordon spoke about, and also her ability to finance this new industrial growth. And the fact that JPS is looking at alternative energy sources that possibly will allow me to pay the same 7 cents per kilowatt hour that my mother pays in Fort Lauderdale.
That's all gas.
Oh, okay, all right.
But that's a good thought.
Good thought. I think it's more than a thought. We would love to get down from the 42 cents that we now pay closer to even the teens. But I know that that is the road that we're on, and that's the road that you intend to take us on. And so it's very gratifying to know that all of the different alternatives are being put in the pot and being stirred, and somewhere, somehow, we have to come out with maybe 13 cents. 25. She promised us 25 in the near term. By the end of 27? 17. Okay. We can live with that. 25 cents? Yeah. We're going to have to live with that. It only emphasizes from the master builder's point of view that not only master builders, but all of the associated industries that link with us, that we're going to have to compete. We have the location, we have the beaches, we have the ports, but we're going to have to internationally compete, as the minister suggested, with all the other guys who want to come in here and outbid us. We're going to have to compete, and the lesser we pay for energy, the more we're better able to compete. And that's our goal. Okay, I hope you all have been taking your notes, because we now go into the panel discussion. And the people on the front desk here are prepared to answer all your questions relevant to the logistics hub. No questions about light bills, questions about the logistic hub and the construction. I'm going to take Chairman's privilege and ask the first question. And it is very simply this. With all the projects that have to come on stream to create the warehousing, the storage facilities, the roadways, the bridges, and all other facilities that obviously must be built or re-engineered to facilitate the logistics hub scenario. How are those projects going to be vetted and bidded? Is it the government? Professor Shirley, maybe you can take this one. Are these going to be private enterprise people investing in the facilities, or the government asking the contractors to build what would be government-owned facilities?
As it relates to the infrastructure, we are anticipating that there will be an involvement from the entities like the Port Authority of Jamaica in the infrastructure, certainly for the ports, and we know that some components of the road would be done by the government. You will note that the highway, the North-South Highway, is a private enterprise, and you will note that I emphasize that the Czech development is really going to be financed by a private entity. What we anticipate will happen, Patrick, is that the government will concentrate to a larger extent on infrastructural activities, and the private sector would be required to build all of the elements that ride on that infrastructure to provide the growth that we anticipate. And so certainly in the things that we are doing, we are working on an ongoing basis with a variety of private sector interests, because we recognize the limitations of the government to support us through the government guarantees that we would have normally done. Maybe if we had that capacity, we would have been inclined to do more building and so on ourselves. But today, we recognize the importance of partnering with private sector entities, both local and international.
All right, questions from you now, the audience, please.
You mentioned three things. You mentioned the Kingston Wharves project, the KCT project, and the Goat Island project. Are these competing entities for logistics, or are they all a part of the grand plan?
I said that we know that there is a view that they could potentially cannibalize each other. But it's interesting that in a place like Panama, there are 6 ports, 6 terminals, all of which are growing quite substantially at the moment. And we see no reason that you can't have 3 terminals in Jamaica that would coexist. But certainly, when you add the volumes associated with logistics, and accept that the Czech project in the Goat Island would be supporting a 6,000-acre industrial complex, which would have its own import and export of goods, as well as some transshipment. And if we get the areas around the Kingston Container Terminal developed, and if Kingston Wharf develops its own logistic activities, we think we could see a growth in volume associated with that, so they wouldn't be competing.
All right, I just had a question for Professor Shirley. To build, operate, and maintain the logistics hub and some of the developments we're talking about will require a human skill input in terms of trained persons that have the ability to do these things. And I would love to hear a comment on him in terms of the framework that he would see us operating that, the throughput and the pool of persons that would be expected to operate such facilities over the long term.
Availability of a skilled labor force is going to be an integral part of the development of those facilities that we spoke about. You might recall that there's a triangle that I showed up there where you have different skill levels that are required, and so it's not going to be a uniform skill level that is required, but a mix of them. But in the case of the Czech project, where there's talk of 10,000 jobs when it is fully built out, the negotiations with the potential, with the investor, Czech, is for them to have a substantial training facility, which would be linked with the local educational institutions, the universities for the engineers and the skilled persons that are needed, with heart for the persons that the other persons that skilled persons that are required, so that they too would be engaged directly rather than just depending on the public facilities. That these entities would have their own training institutions, and they would provide another tier of know-how which would be specific to the firms that they would be going into, as against the general education that is provided by most of our tertiary institutions.
The large amounts of foreign direct investments that we've had in the past, if you could crystallize for us what caused a lack of backward linkages leading to accelerated GDP growth for the nation, crystallize what the reason for that was and how we're going to prevent that going forward with this large project, i.e. the logistics hub. And the following question is this, well, the second question, Stamlin, I think you said in your presentation that the JPS had agreed not to install new generation capacity. My question is why we made that agreement. So, Professor Shirley and then Mr. Stamlin.
There's one big period of foreign direct investment associated with the aluminum and bauxite companies in the 60s and 70s, which did have a very substantive impact on growth because it also involved the introduction of infrastructure and so on. A lot of the foreign direct investment which has come in recently have gone into hotels. So if you look at the implication of the investments in roadways, the North Coast Highway and the South Coast Highway, but predominantly the North Coast, you will see how a large number of hotels from Negril all the way to Port Antonio have gone in, with a concentration in the area between Montego Bay and Ocho Rios. You have the large Spanish chains which have come in. There was a boost in employment in the construction phase of those, and a little bit when they started employing persons. But to the extent that these are all-inclusive, so that the visitors don't necessarily go out into the rest of the economy the way cruise passengers would. And second, to the extent that they were unable to possibly obtain the goods that they need on a daily basis from local sources. So they received import licenses to bring in the food, to bring in the spares, to bring in whatever they are bringing in, which means that they are then able to purchase in Miami or somewhere else and bring them directly into their operation. It doesn't pass through our economy. And our farmers have not yet fully integrated into the supply network to ensure that all of the food that these persons eat are Jamaican. So in a sense, these are industries that are at the periphery of the economy rather than being fully integrated into the economy. We anticipate that with the opportunities that we have described in cargo, in logistics, in in cruise and in BPO, that there will be a far higher level of integration in the economy in these projects.
From my perspective in the energy space, hindrance to continued investment from the foreign direct investors is, from our perspective, regulatory certainty. In the utility space, usually there's this deal that you're not going to get rich. It's called the regulatory compact, but you're not going to have a significant amount of risk. So you're going to come in, you're going to have a regulated rate of return, but as it always does, risk and return will operate appropriately. And I think for the energy space, what we found is that an anomaly, a global anomaly, is that there's a lot of risk in the energy business, meaning JPS can go to zero profits, they can go below that, and that is an anomaly. So for me, it's a regulatory uncertainty, and I would say a regulatory anomaly that drives what I say stymied investment, at least from my shareholders and those wanting to invest in the energy space and mega projects. You asked the question about why there was an agreement not to replace our generation, and this is just pure Kelly Tomlin. I believe it's because of the mistaken belief that competition is a driver for lower energy prices. And I started by saying we have to decide what the one thing is. So the theory was that if JPS wasn't allowed to invest in the generation or replace it, then we'd have a competitive model which would lead to lower energy prices. I think that if we study that around the globe, and just use the US because it's easy, 34 of the states continue to be non-competitive states, and that the states that do have competition have something, a trading floor, people trade energy that don't have one generation plant. So this idea of competition and what it is we need to compete for, I think may have taken a different view that they might today, because for me today, the competition we have to be in, all of us together, is the competition for fuel diversity, for gas. And that means we need a strong central buying entity, either the government or a utility, that is seen in the world market as a safe bet for gas, because everybody wants gas, and we have to look like and be the place that should get fuel diversity that lowers energy prices, that improves the economy. So the answer to your question is, I believe it was based on a mistaken belief in the energy market that adding competition and PPAs that get, by the way, 20-year PPAs, most of which are capacity payment, meaning they get paid if they don't run 1 hour. 80% of it's about that. JPS's fixed payment is about 23% today, not a fixed payment regardless of running. So that's my answer. I think it is, again, I'm just stating the same thing over and over, a definition of what competition would bring.
First part of your question is, when does the hub project start? The project is start time for that professor would be the dredging. Would that start with the dredging?
Technical analyses and the economic analyses for the design of the facility have been done. They will have to do the environmental impact assessment before the project can get underway. Checkers maintained that they would begin construction in 2015. And so we would anticipate that the construction job would start being generated in that time period. And the permanent employment as soon as the operation begins. Your question, the second component of your question was, is there a quota for Jamaicans? And the expectation is that most of the employment would be for Jamaicans. What we have sought to ensure and will seek to continue to ensure is that even with the technical jobs, the higher skilled jobs, even if the investors begin by bringing in foreign employees for those positions, which is normally the case, that Jamaicans would be trained for those positions and would assume responsibility for those in due course. That is one of the major reasons for the training component of the project.
How can I be assured that my qualification will be recognized by these international companies when they start developing these facilities?
There has been quite a bit of dialogue. There is a certain degree of responsibility on the part of the students to ensure that the programs that they enroll in are accredited programs. And we anticipate that once these are accredited programs in Jamaica, they will be accepted by the international investors as being appropriate.
Fabian Lewis here from Southwest Steve at Black Rock. To Mr. Gordon, You made mention, Mr. Gordon first and Mr. Cobham Stewart and one of you made mention about the jobs that are going to be created, right? But what will the logistic hub contribute to GDP growth? So Mr. Cobham Stewart, you made mention this morning about linkages and how you're begging the minister. While I agree with you on that, I would like to ask, what is your organization doing at this particular moment to create these linkages between the prospective overseas companies and Jamaican companies? And finally, to Ms. Cummins, 25% at what, 2070?
Cents.
17% reduction by
17.
by 2017.
We've been given this bogey of 25 cents, which would make us, other than Trinidad, the cheapest in the Caribbean, a significant decrease. So it's 30% by the end of 2017 is the goal we've been given.
Okay, follow up to that. How will the current price of electricity affect the operation and the logistic hub and its profitability over the period of time? Between now and probably when you get that reduction.
I do believe the timeline works out, but as I think Prof. Shirley said, that there are people looking at individual solutions. We are also proposing a number of things, economic development tariffs. We do believe, and we're doing analysis now, that individual solutions for every person with a SEZ zone, or it would not be optimal from the country, but if you have a significant load, it might make sense for you to have an individual solution. But I do believe we'll have to get creative around economic development tariffs like we do in every other market, and how we give wholesale tariffs, a cost-based tariff for our largest customers, and how do we look at the economic development impact for rate structures in the way we have it before.
A project like this contributes to GDP.
Yes.
And I think that there are a number of ways in which you can do that. One, we would expect an expansion in the construction sector. So that component of the economy would grow. We anticipate that there would be, just looking at the information that I shared with you, Czech anticipates that there could be as high as 10,000 persons now employed that would be generating income which is not currently in the economy. They would be paying taxes, so the government would also benefit from that. And then all of these industries would require service provision. There are a variety of services that would be required, from financial to insurance to repair services. So that aside from those directly employed in the facilities, there would be other spin-offs into the economy. Those are the ways in which GDP would likely be impacted by the projects that we are talking about.
Let us continue. Carvel.
Before I answer your question, the youngster from the university, UTEC, had suggested that I had said we had implemented a policy. No, we hadn't. We had asked that a policy be put in place. Okay? In terms of linkages, the main source for us, first of all, we seek information as to who might or might not be coming to Jamaica. In order to get that information, there are sources from the government, JAMPRO, organizations such as the Port Authority, the various government implementing agencies we try to get information from. We also have a website that is out there and through which we have had numerous contacts. So linkages are mainly through government organizations, mainly JAMPRO, who interact with potential investors and incoming people, right?
You go directly to those companies to start a partnership by yourself, or would you still follow the government bureaucracy and then you stay 10, 15 years getting?
You have to understand the process in order to determine whether or not you do what you suggested. In other words, if a company has already acquired a contract here, they have been involved in a process, a tendering process, an assessment process, and more than likely, as Minister pointed out earlier, the infrastructure committee of the cabinet would have reviewed their bid, etc. So it really is not a matter now of going out there. In a lot of cases, locals have bidded against them, But what has happened generally is that they may, if they so desire, inquire into the industry to obtain partners here, or some companies will address them directly. That's the process at the moment. All right?
The opportunities that could arise. Let's just think of a country like Panama. Through their import-export activities in 2011, they have contributed about $24 billion to their GDP through import-export activities. Not that they'll become a Panama overnight, but at least it shows the sort of scale and capabilities. Panama consistently grow 6-7% per annum, and that's what, it's an opportunity for Jamaica to look forward.
I don't know where you have been, but I'm happy that you are now supporting me, because I have been like a voice in the wilderness on this Chinese problem for the better part of 2 years now. I've even been accused of being too aggressive in my advocacy of the matter. But what else and where else can we go with this? I have said to the government, the ministers, over and over again, that this is a downward path for the country. I have called it short-term gain, long-term loss. Because over the longer term, and one of the things I said is that if you even take the North-South Highway, which you referred to about the payments, we are going to be paying for that highway over the next 50 years, I gather. But we have not benefited from its implementation, as you have so ably pointed out, right? So if you want me to start up again, I certainly will. I have no hesitation in doing that. But I've been doing this, I've done it on television, I've done it on radio, and I've done it in the press. I even have articles that I've written. I think the last magazine has in references to that. I've made a point about the economic value of what is going on to us as far as, over the last 2 years, we are being told that there has been growth in the construction industry. And I keep pointing out that the local participants are not seeing that growth, right? And the growth clearly is the growth that is being operated by others. And I've pointed out that when these people execute projects in Jamaica, only about 15% of the value of the construction project comes into this economy, only about 15. When we execute, over 50% does, right? I've pointed out that among the things they do is they pay their workers in China. A lot of people would know that. So those wages that would have come to Jamaicans and would have passed through the economy, as pointed out by Professor Shirley earlier, they don't come here. So I'm willing, and you have, Al Brown and Owen Saunderson. They and I, Al is here.
Yes.
Welcome, Al. They and I participate in dialogue from time to time as to how we're going to address this matter and how can we keep it on the front burner, right? Because we recognize that it's a difficulty. So it's not that we haven't been doing anything. In fact, I may want to accuse you of not doing anything, but that's not true, because I speak with Al and Owen and I know what they do.